Now, you may think I'm crazy when I say this, but I think the PlayStation crowd is a tad bit unreasonable. So Final Fantasy XVI launches on June 22nd, the day I'm recording this actually, so maybe you're playing it right now. But on June 21st, reviews started coming out from major publications, and while overall reception has been very respectable, it seems that the scores simply were not good enough for the Sony faithful. Now, I don't know if the recent reception to Starfield has just made the PlayStation fanbase a little overly eager for something good, or maybe they're just not used to their exclusives getting anything less than complete praise across the board, but the reception to the reception of Final Fantasy XVI has honestly been kind of amazing. At the time of recording, Final Fantasy XVI has an 88 Metascore after 100 critic reviews, which is extremely good, extremely respectable. But everyone knows by now that an 88 isn't good enough for the Sony fans, because basically if you gave this game anything less than a 90, the ponies were coming after you, even if they hadn't played the game yet. The first review I want to talk about that got hit particularly hard on Twitter in an extra stupid way, because at the time that these reviews went live and the time everyone was getting angry about them, the game hadn't come out yet. So just keep that in mind, that all of the screenshots you're about to see and all the anger you're about to see is from before the game even came out. So there was literally no way for anyone to actually know what they were angry about, other than the fact that the number wasn't a 90. But the first review I want to talk about is from VGC, who gave the game a 4 out of 5, very respectable. They were super enthusiastic about the gameplay, saying it has the best combat in the series, but criticizing the spongy enemies early on, the somewhat shallow RPG mechanics, and some stunted animations and strange camera behavior. But they closed their 4 out of 5 review by saying Final Fantasy has never played better, and 16's cast is destined to be fan favorites. We just wish that when they were outside of the Hollywood blockbuster tier adventures of the main quest, they were given some more interesting adventures to pursue. And before anyone says anything, FF16 is meant to be a much more action-oriented and more linear game than previous entries in the series, and I've seen a lot of people write off criticism of the RPG elements by just pointing out that it's more of a character action game, but frankly, I don't think that's fair. Square Enix made the decision to tone down the RPG elements, absolutely fair, absolutely their prerogative, but they also made the decision to keep some RPG elements in there, and I want to make it very clear that throughout this review, the writer is very deliberately criticizing how the RPG elements were implemented. They are not criticizing the toning down of RPG elements. Like, the review is very explicit about this, stating, quote, "It can feel at times that the RPG flourishes were added as a necessity to make it a Final Fantasy game, rather than the strong action title that's at the core of the experience. The side content does feature great writing, and the quality of the missions themselves improve right as the game is about to conclude, but it then runs into the pacing issue of going full pelt towards a thrilling finale, leaving little incentive to go and do those side missions unless you're a completionist." Again, the criticism is not that the RPG elements were toned down, it's that they were not implemented as well as they could be. But did that stop PlayStation Twitter from pouncing? The fuck do you think? So you guys lowered the score just because it's not fully 90s RPG? What a joke of a review. Yes, that's totally what happened here. You definitely read it. Are you serious? Just because it's not an old RPG style, you say? No, actually they didn't say that. So, weird. It's their first true action RPG as a Final Fantasy game. It has never built to carry on the heritage. Which, like, yeah, I get it. Final Fantasy 16 isn't meant to carry on where Final Fantasy 15 left off, but also that wasn't the argument. The argument was that the RPG elements were not implemented very well in this game, and for a series that's known for RPG elements because it's an RPG, like that's a valid point of criticism. You're lowering the score because an action-adventure game with RPG elements is intentionally not a true RPG? Are you serious? No, again, it's one thing to criticize a game for not doing something you wanted, and if that's what was going on here, I would honestly be there with you guys calling the review stupid. But they literally said, in very explicit terms, that the problem was the way the RPG mechanics were implemented, but God forbid we do more than read the headline and the number out of 5. But that wasn't the only thing people were mad about in regards to the VGC review, because a few people were really mad about Zelda, for some reason. Seems like every game is scored much harder than the Zelda games are. Reviewers are somehow willing to forgive all the shortcomings of Zelda and give it perfect scores. Strange, Tears of the Kingdom is a good game, but not a perfect one. Because we were totally talking about Zelda just now. Weren't you aware? If this was Zelda, y'all swear it would be 6 stars while tapping A to cook some apples. Fucking Christ. I'll never get people's insistence that they know better than the reviewers before the game is even out, because again, all these reviews are from after the review went live, but before the game went public. Like, you have nothing to base any of this off of, but just keep going, I guess. All this fucking crying over a 4 out of 5, like, seriously? If I was really excited for a game that was coming out and then an early review gave it a 4 out of 5, that would make me more excited. Although I do think it's kind of funny to bring up Zelda in this regard, because it seems like people are mad at this reviewer because they just like, oh, they can't accept it's not an RPG or whatever. Like the reviewer is upset that it's not a traditional Final Fantasy game. But like, the last 2 Zelda games have not been traditional Zelda games, and they've reviewed phenomenally. So maybe bringing up Zelda as a direct comparison isn't actually a good idea if you're trying to make a point about bias. How about some other ones? You guys clearly use freelancers for reviews. Your scoring consistency is all over the shop. God forbid different reviewers have different opinions and different standards for how they review different games. Whoa, that's crazy. Look at me, I'm different. Everyone giving glowing reviews except me. Give me the clicks, please. Because apparently 4 out of 5 is not a good review. Yikes. Stop reviewing games, please. Just another day on PlayStation Twitter, I guess. I mean, the blood was in the water at this point. But there was another review actually getting bent over the spanking stool at the same time, and that was over a Game Informer, who actually hilariously gave an even better score than VGC did. Game Informer gave Final Fantasy XVI an 8.5 out of 10, and had a lot of the very same criticisms as VGC. Gee whiz, who would have thought that maybe a Square Enix game just isn't perfect? Now, before anyone says anything, Game Informer had a couple really stupid lines in here about there not being enough people of color in this game set in medieval Europe. Again, they gave the game an 8.5 out of 10, and their criticisms are more elaborate than just the people of color thing, like, which again is confined to just a couple sentences, so I'm not gonna dwell on it because it's not the point I'm trying to make. But I did just want to point that out because fucking, why are we still doing this, games journalism? Why? It's fucking weird. The larger point I'm trying to make here is that, much like VGC, Game Informer pointed out that the pacing of Final Fantasy XVI is a little off due to the underdeveloped RPG mechanics, and they also pointed out that the character models can be a bit stiff, and also made some comments about the performance issues. Which, yeah, when you mix those things together, it sounds like an 8.5 to me. But leave it to Twitter to, again, only focus on the little details when the bigger picture is what's important. I do think the responses to the Game Informer review are really funny though, because the general consensus here is that Game Informer just doesn't know how to review RPGs, like, oh, they just hate RPGs. But the consensus of the VGC review was that they were dumb for expecting an RPG. Like, look at this. Who the fuck wrote this review? Do these journalists understand what RPGs are? Never thought I'd see a Final Fantasy review going, this would be a better game if it was just an action game and not an RPG. Not sure I like where this is going. Lol, what kind of blurb is that? It's an RPG. It's just funny because, like, 5 minutes ago, VGC sucked because they wanted more RPG. But also Game Informer sucks because they want more action game. Like, fucking, which one is it? And both of these outlets gave really good scores to this game. Like, the vitriol here is in response to an 8 out of 10 and an 8.5 out of 10. Like, holy shit. Like, maybe you can just read between the lines of these two reviews and come to the conclusion that perhaps making this game more linear while still insisting on including RPG elements led to some pacing issues. And what's that? Oh, the game struggles to run at 60 frames per second? And oh, the game gets down to 720p on the PS5? Fuck, if I was reviewing this, you'd be lucky to get an 8.5. I just get a fucking hoot out of the fact that when VGC has an issue with the RPG elements, it's because, oh, it's supposed to be an action game, not an RPG. But when Game Informer has an issue with the RPG elements, it's because, you just don't know how to review RPGs. Like, so is this an RPG or not? Are we supposed to criticize this as an RPG or not? Like, do you actually know what this game is, or are you just trying to avoid criticism? Although that wasn't the only negative thing people had to say about this Game Informer review. So having more content other than being linear is a flaw? The amount of content in a game isn't indicative of quality. Ubisoft sandboxes have lots of content, and that's often to their detriment. You should blacklisted by Square Enix for an 8.5 out of 10 review. Like, fucking call me crazy, but I think if a game has lackluster RPG mechanics, pacing problems, and struggles to maintain 60 FPS, but is otherwise good, I think an 8.5 is more than fair. Ugh, I just think it's funny that PlayStation Twitter is always so eager to destroy anyone who gives an exclusive less than a 90 out of 100. And even at that point, a 90 would probably be too low. Like, regardless of what the reasons are, these people don't fucking play games. Like, it really is hard to believe that these people actually play games sometimes. Like, maybe Starfield really does just have you that scared. I don't know. By all accounts, this game looks really good, and when the PlayStation guys are done beta testing it, I'll happily pick it up, because I really don't like Final Fantasy games, but I really do like character action games. In fact, I'm gonna go play DMC5 right now. But the reception to this game does really just kind of make you wonder why Square Enix didn't go all out and just make a character action game with no RPG elements. Because as pretty much anyone can tell you, shoving RPG elements into a game that's not really fundamentally designed for them, yeah, it's no surprise when that causes pacing issues. And also, just throwing it out there, the lack of discussion around this game's performance issues from mainstream critics is insane to me. This game gets down to 720p, are you shitting in my face? And this is yet another AAA game on the PS5 that can't hold 60 FPS in performance mode? Are you pooping in my ears? A 4 out of 5 is a good score. An 8.5 out of 10 is a good score. And if you are upset that the score wasn't higher, maybe you should look at the game and not the person reviewing it. Toodles.